Alright, good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Contact. Alright, tonight I've gone ahead and drawn in the canoe and rower of the sky water here that will be rowing out into this broad river. So I've just made up some real simple red and deep blue Prussian, and we're going to make the canoe bright red and the reflection deep blue.
And translated from Hebrew to English by several different translators and studied by these scholars known to people.
So that is the root of the sigil, the circle,
yes,
the holy words,
yes,
the
the
holy letters, all of that can be traced to the but to
Isaiah 90.
but through this macabre mystical tradition. Very interesting. You see, I keep going back to this thing about language. You get the same peculiar emphasis on language and letters in the esoteric doctrines that surround the chakras in Tantric Shaivism. A huge amount of exegesis goes into the explication of these letters which appear on the petals of the chakras and talking about the ontological status of these letters and what they mean and so forth. It's as though
Still pretty wet.
the medium of language itself is under review in these encounters with these entities. It may be that somehow the field of language needs to be prepared for communication with them, or that the field of language can be prepared for communication with them, and that what happened in the West was some kind of peculiar stiffening of language against the ability to receive and express this stuff that is now beginning to break down. That
for them to misuse language is their divine responsibility.
yes, and that linearity and print and all that conferred upon language an inability to deal with the invisible world in a meaningful way. And so it just became pathology. But now it's returning, and people such as ourselves who have one foot in this world have a real obligation to cognize this.
The Indian tradition, according to the theory of Alan identifies Shiva with Dionysus. And Dionysus, according to Diodorus Siculus, studying the history of the world in 50 BC, is a translation of Isis to Kriti. So there's the suggestion that combining these two historians of a transmission from of the Isis legend from Egypt to the Indus River. That's the suggested transmission there. And if so, we could see the Judeo-Christian tradition proceeding primarily from the Chaldean and the Hindu primarily from the
shadow.
And the enormous differences between these two
carbon.
totally taking the same kind of volume, but with totally different flavors of images. Really different the language thing. The Indo-European versus the Semitic, basically. Completely different images, language, alphabets, and yet, to go back one step, so reaching outreach to Chautauqua, New to try to see the common root of the Sumerian, say, Babylonian, and the other. Each has a version of the Hermetic tradition, with magic, with journeys, with afterlife, and so on. So here we reach the God of the horizon, vision of the past is there.
Well, I believe that the people that you call Egyptian were the African people who were coming out of Africa as the glaciation, as the interglacial proceeded, and that the people that you're calling Sumerian were older people who had been already crossed into Asia before the last glacier, and they were there. And then when these two floods came together during the last melt, history was born in subjugation of these.
And this is the horizon you're suggesting there might actually be the Holocene. But prehistorians never suggest civilizations before the Holocene. There's very little discussion of the intelligent science, mythology, and so on of these 100, 200, 300,000 years BC was in these previous interglacials. And it could be that there was agriculture. I mean, there would be no way to rule that out, that there was an agricultural revolution in the interglacial before the Holocene.
Mm-hmm.
So what do they call it? Cro-Magnon, or the Neanderthals, I guess is the usual word for this period of time. So I'm suggesting they had navigation, they had architecture, they had sacred geometry, and they had astrology, and they had magic and travel in their own images of the heavens and the underworld. All of that tradition comes fully formed into the Holocene interglacial from these previous interglacials, from the memory of people hiding out in caves, preserving their knowledge and faith on.
Yes, I think the major cultural artifact that was added during that glacial period that the new people expressed as they moved out of Africa 17,000 years ago was pastoralism. Pastoralism was invented during that last glacial period when those populations were bottled up in Africa. All previous human migrations into the Middle East out of Africa had been in the absence of domesticated animals. When you mentioned that this entity thing was of high importance in the Hermetic tradition, was it because you were thinking of the fact that actually the main focus of the book 4 of the Hermetic corpus is this animation of statues? This was a major concern in the early Hermetic tradition, was to somehow draw the stellar demon down into a simulacrum from which it could then articulate.
Yes, this is a high technology, beyond communication, assisting in the intervention, talking about embassies. Embassies were temples, and if we were going to think about someday a new society, a world order, what education would be, what rituals would be, and so on. I think we should take heart of the fact that our culture had evolved around ritual, that there was an important guiding sentence, particularly the Akinci festival, the paradigmatic New Year's festival that was celebrated annually in Babylonia for 15 years, for 2,000 years ago, missing the beat. This had certain basic elements which characterize our whole history, most particularly the sacred marriage and the sacred procession. Sacred marriage was the obtaining for a temporary contract for 1 year between the king, that is the social organization of humans in this city-state, with divine god and goddess essentially in charge of prosperity, crops and so on. So that was
Alright, so the canoe's in place,
in
basically. Need some refinement, but it's getting there. Alright, now for the reflection.
But the role of the king was actually played by the king, who actually took his power from the ritual. Then the sacred procession had to do with the Hermetic empowerment of the statues of gods and goddesses, which include a lot of animals, mushrooms, and so on. And then we were paraded in a circle tour through the town and everything. And one of the days, usually these festivals lasted 11 days, so there was plenty of time to do all of stuff. But Egypt had more festivals than days in the year. It wasn't necessary to go to them. The priests and priestesses did the work for you. You could just keep on working. But every day, one of the temples in one of the cities in Egypt would be having one of these things where they did the work for you. And it involved the magical empowerment of these statues. The main theme was celestial magic. I mean, it was the incorporation or the bringing down the inspiration of Gaia with celestial beings' intelligence and powers, understanding Gaia as a younger entity than the celestial sphere. I would see that as the key theory, if there is one, in Hermetic corpus. And the reason why a lot of people nowadays practicing magic are specializing in star magic and trying to reconstruct it from the corrupt mythology of Western astrology.
So then, what personal experience do we have of entities? I mean, if there are star spirits, as I believe perfectly possible, and I think it's very likely you could invoke them by various kinds of magic, and you could somehow connect with the star, and I think to do that you'd have to look at it. I don't think it's anybody doing this just from books. I think you have to lie out into the sky and actually connect with the star through the line of sight. Or do it through a mirror or whatever, but you have to look at it. Then, if that's possible, what kind of information would such beings impart? We know that they thought that Sirius had particular things, Aldebaran, various stars had particular properties, and Algol was a dangerous one. So there were these widespread beliefs about the properties of particular stars, and then there were hosts of lesser stars, and in fact, most books on angels and most accounts of angels describe them as innumerable, as the stars are. And the connection of angels and stars is made very explicit in the Christian tradition. So there's one class of spirits associated with stars. Now, have you ever met one? And if we haven't met one, which I haven't, could we, or would we want to try and meet one by carrying out an appropriate ceremony, invocation, in a suitably receptive pharmacological state, or whatever?
Well, with the proviso suitable pharmacological state, I think suddenly the stage becomes crowded with stellar demons, earth demons, and what have you.
But do you know for sure that they're stellar demons? Have you ever connected your experience of a stellar demon with directly looking at its resident star and connecting through the senses?
We do have this experience in a limited way. Among the stars, there are all these asterisms, which are among our most ancient knowledge. And I think pictograms, petroglyphs, and so on, in many cases are drawings of asterisms. It's sort of like a Rorschach when you look at the sky, and there are all these dots, and you can connect them up any way. When there's a tradition of connecting them up in a certain way, then you have an astrological tradition. So mythology, I mean, there's star mythology, is all of the Greek myths, for example, are projected into the sky with these asterisms, or what we call constellations. So mythology is suggested that myth is from mythos. Mythos meant the lyrics, the words of the song from the rituals, and that myths gained the power they now have in their conscious and unconscious lives through their secondary role in the ritual, which I think the ritual and the myth together as part of our tradition is one of the most important things for us to be doing. And these old rituals were actually the bringing down the place where star magic was worked successfully to empower our evolution. Our own experience, like my experience of watching the sky and trying to figure out the asterisms that had only been going on for 2 or 3 years. However, in all of these astrological systems that we know, the wanderers are particularly important and most important for the sun and the moon. And we do have, I think, travels and communications with the sun and the moon in our recent experience of shamanic dreams and dreams. There were during the 1960s in Santa Cruz when I first came there, monthly moon festivals where we did a ritual that we imagined very much to be like the Dionysian festivals in Crete, the Orphic rituals translated to Greece as the Eleusinian mysteries and so on, where psychedelics were sexual rites and star magic were combined into an annual or monthly ritual of tremendous power, of adequate power to produce prosperity for people, for animals, for plants, and peace. Peace, I think, was not produced by just a partnership paradigm in a lucky society to have escaped the bad habits of the dominated paradigm. There was also the conscious interaction with the peaceful initiative of the celestial sphere in bringing peace down. And Kuki had no fortifications. They had all this wealth, like the wealth like Kuwait, who didn't get captured until the third millennium. So we have definitely our experience of the sun and the moon, and if we wanted to investigate astrology experientially, then perhaps we could concentrate on the sun and the moon. Tonight will be a full moon. The moon, a soul will be its greatest power, the spirit between the moon and ourselves, our own soul.
Alright, that gets them roughed in anyway. Now I think I'm going to take some light blue and work that horizon line of the second mountain fading up into the water sky.
Where we could look for
So I'm going to reset my tripod here.
of the sun soul that occurs when the moon soul passes into a linear layer, collinear arrangement with our own soul. So those are some experiences that we could have really on a daily basis. The star magicians I came to know in Santa Cruz, if you finish my class, they get up every day, every morning and evening to watch the sunrise and the sunset, no matter how it disturbs their sleep schedule. And I think I've been very affected by sunrise
down a click.
Since early babyhood, I have a fantastic fascination with sunrise and sunset.
Ooh, too much.
In India, I had seen particularly good ones that I felt would be amplified. There means amplified by the appreciation of an entire civilization, the whole country appreciating, knowing, taking the meaning, basking in the rays, giving conscious attention to sunrise and sunset.
Very nice.
Splendid thing to do with the sun is to greet it. To take note of the fact that it did happen again, which we have no reason to believe that it always will.
Well, in our physical environment, we tend to move into cities, move into apartments, exclude nature, push it away from ourselves. In our mental environment, we actually do the same thing. Most people in culture live in a very conventionalized set of notions that are deeply embedded in other conventionalized notions, far from any edge. I think when you go to the edges, physically that would mean deserts, jungles, remote and wild nature. And when you go to the edges in your own mind, meaning meditation, dreams, psychedelics, then you discover there's an extremely rich flora and fauna in the imagination that has simply been ignored because our tendency has always been to look inward, to build inward, and to turn our backs on the raging ocean of phenomena around us that entirely overwhelms our metaphors.
Well, it's all the satanic spirit of science, isn't it? I mean, if one says, what was it that caused this blindness, the question you raised, there's something that happened around the 17th century that Milton described so well in Paradise Lost. There was a consciousness of the spirit of Satan, which is what Paradise Lost is largely about. And there's also a taxonomy of the various demons and fallen angels, which act as malevolent powers that somehow influence things like Mammon, the demon of commercial greed. So if Mammon is worshipped, then you have a whole society that's motivated by money, Mammon's instrument, and entirely under the influence of commercial greed, as our own is obviously, to a very large extent. So here's this personification of Satan, and the primary sin of Satan is pride, turning away from God and declaring his own self-sufficiency. Well, this is precisely the beginning of turning away from God and the angelic and the whole spirit realm and declaring the self-sufficiency of man. It's the humanist illusion.
Mm-hmm.
So you then have this humanist point of view, and then from that all God's demons and everything else become projections of the human mind, which now becomes a kind of geocentric universe. I mean, it's like the old geocentric model.
You even get it in Ficino, who says man is the measure of all things, when actually the order of intelligence could have been the measure of all of that.
Exactly, it's humanism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this putting man at the center. That's why this adopting this alternative position of recognizing all the living, of animism, again, recognizing the living spirit of all nature and living souls of all nature, is profoundly repugnant to humanism, but yet is the common ground of all human civilization, thought and tradition, apart from this deviation that we're thinking about now. So this blinding is a kind of satanic pride, and the spirit of Satan is the spirit of self-sufficiency, of being in charge, and denial, and the spirit of denial of the whole other realm. Like in Goethe's Faust, Faust being a paradigm scientist, selling his soul to the devil in return for unlimited knowledge of power, paradigm of the entire process. By saying it through ceremonial magic, he invokes Mephistopheles. So the guiding spirit of modern science, according to the Faust myth, is a demon. It's in fact a satanic demon, a fallen angel, Mephistopheles. So how seriously does one take then the role of Satan and of malevolent spirits in this disembodied world? Because they're part of its taxonomy and its landscape in many traditions, not only the Christian. And how seriously does one need to take the idea that our whole society and civilization may be under the possession of such a spirit, worshipped through money and other mammon? The spirit of mammon, as Milton describes him in Paradise Lost, he says, even in heaven, his looks and thoughts were always downward bent, admiring more heaven's pavement than aught divine or holy else enjoyed in vision beatific. So there's Mammon, who has this kind of characteristic, and then how when he falls to earth, the first thing he did, he and his crew opened up the sacred hill and digged out ribs of gold. It's the first thing Mammon did when he got to earth.
Mm-hmm.
And started and uncovering treasures better hid, Mother Nature's treasures better hid. So here's the description of a demon, which actually is the spirit of our whole civilization, by Milton in Paradise Lost, as an actual entity. Now, in that case, it's a kind of poetic entity, but it's also a biblical one, Mammon. And Mammon is one of the hosts of Satan, or of the fallen angels. So there's this idea of these malevolent powers that goes back much. In every society you get these malevolent jinns and deceptive spirits and dangerous entities of a kind of, in some sense, autonomous, but in some other sense related to some historical process involving human beings.
So the current manifestation of this satanic entity is the impact in the world petroleum market that is resources, possession, distribution.
Pop that off the tripod.
Yes, and obviously, particularly the United States needs this satanic entity to be incarnate. And now it can't be incarnate in Russia anymore. It's where for a long time the entire imagination could focus on the satanic powers being over there.
Sorry, trying to stabilize my tripod so it doesn't fall over and I don't kick it over while I'm walking around. Talking to the camera. Okay, so that gets the sky. It's a little glarish right there, but that gets the skyline reinforced. A little more aquatic / cloudy. And that gets the canoe figure roughed in. So, cool. That's all I'm trying to accomplish tonight on this one. It's been a long day chopping and keeping a fire going so I don't use any propane for the next few days is my goal. So, that's it for the moment. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch, broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion House, New Mexico, working on oil painting contact. Have a good night, Earth.
Ways of the world, through influence on people, through inspiration.